Are you making these financial mistakes that could cost you your future wealth? Look, I get it. You work hard for your money, and the last thing you want to think about is restricting yourself or missing out on the things you enjoy. But here's the truth. In your 20s, the financial decisions you make can set the stage for a lifetime of wealth or a lifetime of struggle. We're talking about the difference between retiring early and comfortably, or working well into your 70s just to make ends meet. Today, we'll explore the top 5 financial mistakes to avoid using real-life stories and expert advice to guide you. We'll break down each mistake, and more importantly, I'm going to show you exactly how to fix them so you can start building a solid financial future. Let me tell you about a friend of mine. Let's call him John. John had it made, landed a great job right out of college, was making more money than he ever dreamed of, and he was living the life. New car, fancy dinners, weekend trips, you name it. John thought he was on top of the world. But there was one problem. John wasn't tracking his spending. He had no idea where his money was going each month. He thought because he was making good money, budgeting wasn't that important. Fast forward a couple of years, and John's world came crashing down. His company downsized and he was laid off. Suddenly that big paycheck wasn't coming in anymore, but John still had all those bills. The car payment, the rent, the credit card bills from all those dinners and trips. It all came crashing down on him. John quickly found himself drowning in debt, and he was forced to move back in with his parents. He had to sell off his car and pretty much everything he owned just to stay afloat. Look, this story is more common than you think. It's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking budgeting is only for people who are struggling. But the truth is, budgeting is the foundation of a solid financial plan, no matter how much money you make. It's not about restricting yourself, it's about being in control of your money. It's about knowing where your money is going so you can make conscious decisions about how you want to spend it. So, how do you create a budget? It's actually pretty simple. Start by tracking your expenses for a month. Write down every single dollar you spend, whether it's on coffee, rent, or those late-night online shopping sprees. Once you have a good understanding of your spending habits, you can start creating a budget that aligns with your financial goals. Allocate your income towards essential expenses like housing, food, and transportation, and then decide how much you want to allocate towards discretionary spending, savings, and investments. The key is to be realistic and consistent with your budget. Remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. By creating a budget and sticking to it, you'll be well on your way to taking control of your finances and avoiding the financial ruin that John experienced. Let's talk about the magic of compound interest, and why investing early, even with small amounts, can make a huge difference in your long-term wealth. Imagine 2 friends, Sarah and Emily, both 25 years old. Sarah starts investing $100 a month into a low-cost index fund, earning an average annual return of 8%. Emily, on the other hand, decides to wait until she's 35 to start investing. She also invests $100 a month in the same index fund. By the time they both reach 65 years old, Sarah, who started investing 10 years earlier, will have over $233,000 in her account. Emily, who started later, will only have around $100,000. That's a difference of over $130,000 just from starting 10 years earlier. This is the power of compound interest. It's like a snowball effect. The earlier you start, the more time your money has to grow, and the more those returns can compound on themselves. The key takeaway here is that time is your greatest asset when it comes to investing. The sooner you start, the more you benefit from the magic of compound interest. Now, you might be thinking, but I don't have a lot of money to invest right now. And that's okay. The amount you invest is less important than getting started early. Even if you can only afford to invest $20 or $50 a month, do it. The most important thing is to develop the habit of investing consistently. As you earn more money, you can always increase your contributions. Remember, the stock market is a powerful tool for building wealth, but it's a long game. Start early, be consistent, and let compound interest work its magic. Chapter 3. Debt is not your friend. Let's talk about debt, and why it can be one of the biggest obstacles to building wealth. See, debt isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it can be a useful tool, like when you're using it to invest in a property or start a business. But for most people, especially in their 20s, debt often comes in the form of credit card balances, student loans, or car loans. And this kind of debt can quickly spiral out of control if you're not careful. The problem with debt is that it's expensive. When you carry a balance on your credit card, you're charged interest on that balance. and those interest rates can be ridiculously high, sometimes even over 20%. This means that instead of your money working for you, it's actually working against you. Every dollar you pay in interest is a dollar that you could have been saving or investing. So, how do you avoid accumulating debt? The first step is to live below your means. This means spending less than you earn and avoiding lifestyle inflation. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses by buying things you don't need or can't afford. If you're tempted to make a purchase, ask yourself if it's a need or a want. If it's a want, wait 24 hours before buying it. Chances are you'll realize you don't actually need it. Another important step is to create a debt repayment plan. If you have existing debt, prioritize paying it down as quickly as possible. Start by focusing on the debt with the highest interest rate, while still making minimum payments on your other debts. Once that debt is paid off, move on to the next highest interest rate debt and so on. Remember, the goal is to get out of debt and stay out of debt. By being mindful of your spending and making a plan to pay down any existing debt, you'll be well on your way to financial freedom. Chapter 4. Don't let this wreck your finances. Life is unpredictable, right? One minute everything's going smoothly, and the next minute you're hit with a financial curveball. Your car breaks down, you lose your job, or you have an unexpected medical expense. These things happen, and when they do, you need to be prepared. That's where an emergency fund comes in. An emergency fund is essentially a safety net for your finances. It's a stash of cash that you set aside specifically for unexpected expenses. This way, when life throws you a curveball, you don't have to go into debt to cover the costs. Without an emergency fund, you're much more vulnerable to financial setbacks. A sudden expense could wipe out your savings, force you to take on high-interest debt, or even lead to bankruptcy. So, how much should you have in your emergency fund? A good rule of thumb is to have 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses saved up. This means that if you lost your job or had another major financial disruption, you'd be able to cover your essential expenses for at least 3 to 6 months while you get back on your feet. Now, I know it can be tough to save up several months' worth of expenses, especially when you're just starting out. But the key is to start small and be consistent. Even if you can only afford to save $50 or $100 a month, do it. Set up a separate savings account specifically for your emergency fund and automate your contributions. Consider it a non-negotiable expense, just like your rent or your phone bill. Remember, having an emergency fund is not about being pessimistic, it's about being prepared. It's about having peace of mind knowing that you can handle whatever life throws your way without derailing your financial progress. Chapter 5. Stop throwing money away. Have you ever noticed how as you start making more money, your expenses seem to magically increase as well? You get a raise, you start buying nicer things, eating out more often, and maybe even upgrading your apartment or your car. This, my friends, is called lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the biggest wealth killers out there. The problem with lifestyle inflation is that it keeps you stuck in the same financial position, even as you earn more money. You're essentially running on a treadmill, working harder and harder just to stay in the same place. Instead of using your increased income to save more, invest more, or pay down debt, you're simply increasing your spending to match your new income level. So, how do you avoid the trap of lifestyle inflation? It all comes down to being intentional with your spending and focusing on your financial goals. Before you upgrade your lifestyle, ask yourself if it aligns with your long-term financial goals. Is that new car or bigger apartment really going to bring you closer to your goals of early retirement, financial freedom, or whatever it is you're working towards? If not, it's probably not worth the expense. Another helpful tip is to track your spending and identify areas where you might be prone to lifestyle inflation. Are you eating out more often than you used to? Are you buying more clothes or gadgets than you need? Once you've identified these areas, you can start setting limits for yourself and finding ways to cut back. Remember, it's okay to treat yourself occasionally, but don't let lifestyle inflation sabotage your financial future. Focus on building wealth, not just accumulating stuff. Outro. Your journey to financial freedom starts now. Avoiding these 5 financial mistakes can set you on the path to financial freedom. By creating a budget, investing early and consistently, managing debt wisely, building an emergency fund, and avoiding lifestyle inflation, you'll be well on your way to achieving your financial goals. But there's one more secret to building wealth that we haven't covered yet. It's something that can supercharge your financial growth and help you reach your goals even faster. Click on the video on the end screen to discover the power of compounding and how it can transform your financial future.